Goalkeepers, nervous strikers, they'll deliver. Crowd roars erupted. You can feel the quake. 80,000 voices.
I think I must respond to Sunday Oliseh. I certainly must respond to what Sunday Oliseh has said and what other people have been saying about what he said about Victor James Osimhen. I must respond to it. I think sometimes when you have information, when you have experience, in a particular field, in a particular sector, I think it's good for you to be fair with the information you put out there. Now, Sunday Oliseh, just to preface everything I'm about to say, Sunday Oliseh is one of Nigeria's foremost captains. He was one of the very best to do it in terms of being that deep line playmaker. His shots, his ability to control midfield, to distribute passes was something that Nigerians hadn't seen, until he came on board. So, super fantastic player, wonderful captain. I'll always remember how he came off the bench when Nigeria, I think, were losing to Senegal and just inspired the team to victory. So, from a footballing standpoint, top player. And then even when he coached Nigeria, I think he showed a bit of tactical know-how. He showed some level of football intelligence, although overall things didn't work out. So fair play. No issues with Sunday Oliseh, no issues with anybody. But I must address this sort of news, this sort of talk, this sort of narrative that is constantly being put out there. First off, the mistake people are making is they make it about Victor James Osimhen. They make it about him. They think this discussion is solely about Victor Osimhen. What they don't quite understand is they're also affecting other Nigerian players who are currently playing, the ones that will come after them, in terms of how players will be valued who have come out from Nigeria, or who, even though are trained in Europe, grew up in Europe, born in Europe, grew up in Europe, trained in Europe, once they decide to play for Nigeria, how this sort of narrative being put out there affects their valuation. And one thing that Sunday Oliseh has done, and other people as well that have sort of joined and agreed with his opinion or what he put out there, is that they have treated this Victor Osimhen thing in a vacuum. They've ignored industry practices. They've ignored, what the market is saying as to player valuation. They've ignored all that and just decided to go all out and say whatever they wanted to say about Victor Osimhen. Now, Victor Osimhen, had a fantastic season with Napoli, and was poised to join Chelsea at some point a season afterwards. So there's a question of valuation, there's a question of wages, and then there's also a question of, and then some people brought up issues about character issues and whatnot. And I asked myself, where, do we come about those character issues? Now, let me break things down for everyone. And then going on to this point where he joined Galatasaray, and despite the fact that his his buyout clause was 75 billion euros, a lot of top clubs did not sign Victor Osimhen. And people have come up with different reasons. Sunday Oliseh, the video he made, was basically outlining what he believes, are those reasons why Victor Osimhen wasn't signed by any top club. Now, don't get me wrong, Galatasaray is a magnificent club, a gigantic club in its own right. So let me break it down for you. Victor Osimhen, fantastic footballer on the under-17 side, played very well, went to Wolfsburg, didn't quite make it there, had injury problems, and a young kid just living in Nigeria, going his first European move, he struggled. But at Charleroi, he scored goals. At Lille, scored goals. Napoli, he scored lots of goals. And then he had a season where he had manager changes, those sort of issues. He scored goals, but not at the expected level. And then at Galatasaray, he scored the goals he scored, 37 goals in 41 appearances in all competitions. And then you got people asking why, no top European clubs went on to sign Victor Osimhen. Now, what we've heard from the likes of Sunday Oliseh is, one, his valuation was just too crazy. Now, really though, Sunday Oliseh, I ask you this, really, there's some other content creators out there, some other YouTubers and whatever. I ask the question, really, are you Are you really sure his valuation was the issue? Right now, which is you have Alexander Isak, valued at £110 million. That is not even, there's no release clause. This is not something where you have a release clause and the club the selling club has said either you pay the release clause or nothing. It's not. It hasn't been one of those. It hasn't been one of those at all. That's been Liverpool's valuation for Alexander Isak, £110 million. Liverpool valuing between 120 and 150. Now, Victor Osimhen has scored more goals than Alexander Isak, playing less games. Now, let's move on to the next thing that we'll talk about. Talk about character issues. Now, what sort of character issues are you talking about? Now, you and I know, especially if you're a Nigerian or if you follow African football and you watch Victor Osimhen, you know he gives his all every time he plays, game in, game out. Game in, game out. He gives his all for the team. Even for Napoli, when he plays for Napoli, he gave his all for the team, running, sacrificing himself. And then there was this issue about, falling out with the head coach of the Nigerian Super Eagles. Now, let's say you worked at a tech startup, yeah? And every day you go to work, you make sure, your developers are on it, working on point. Your front end designers your UX designers are working on point, getting them delivered, and you're bringing in clients, and you always work. And then one day you're a bit under the weather, and you tell your line manager, sorry, today I don't think I'm well enough to be at work. The doctor says I shouldn't I shouldn't come to work. I shouldn't do anything that would stress me, mentally. So I can't be at the office today. But I know we've got a big client coming in. So I can just be at the office there, and I know if they see me, that would, inspire some confidence in them. And then your boss tells you, no worries, just rest up, make sure you're well to come into work. And then a couple of days afterwards, you hear your boss telling other people, I don't like people who don't come into work, basically discrediting you and demeaning your character, even if he knows you always give your all when you're at work. And this is just one day that you've not been at work. So that's basically what happened to Victor Osimhen. He had fitness issues. The international break, he called the head coach at the time, Finidi George. Finidi George says, it's okay, it's fine. Don't bother even coming in. That's okay. And then Finidi George went on to say what he said, at the radio, on a radio station. Now, the way Victor Osimhen reacted to it, while I understand the emotion behind this reaction, I wouldn't say that's what I would have done. He went on IG, he said what he said, was very upset. Now, is that enough to amount to the character issue sort of thing that people are going on about? There was a point where, Victor Osimhen was, I would say, racially abused by his team via their own social media platform, their own social media handle. The official one, this is not some irate fan or anything. The official handle of Napoli on TikTok. So he got upset. So what would you expect someone to do? To be chummy and be happy? Oh yeah, you just insulted me, you just abused me. Oh, I'll be happy. Oh, cheers to you. No, that's not what you expect. Sometimes we forget the fact that these footballers are humans. Forget that fact sometimes. And then with this whole narrative of his character issues. Show me where the character issues are. Then you come with people who go to his production. He doesn't score that many goals. He scored 20 goals only once in his career. Really? First off, that narrative in itself has a flaw. What if a striker scores 19 goals in a season? Does that mean he's had a bad season? So Victor Osimhen, he struggles at Wolfsburg. I don't think he scored a goal for Wolfsburg, or was it 1 or 2 goals, something of that nature. And then he went on to Charleroi. He scored 20 goals in 36 games. He went to Lille. He scored 18 goals in 38 games. He went to Napoli. And his entire career at Napoli, he scored 76 goals in 133 games. And yet, people want to attack his production. And then one other thing that Sunday Oliseh talked about in his valuation as well was, sell-on clause, the issue of sell-on clause, that would affect, the valuation of Victor Osimhen. Now, how do you get to know how much the sell-on clause, how much he would actually be sold for by Galatasaray, if indeed he gets sold? And the sell-on clause is not something that attaches itself or has attached itself solely to Victor Osimhen. You have it in contracts all over the world. Players have lots of sell-on clauses. You have you have players where they've made 2 moves, and then you hear an academy somewhere, maybe in Belgium, somewhere in France, suddenly comes upon £3 million or 3 million euros. And this is because of a sell-on clause they inserted in the contract before they sold him, let's say maybe to a Metz or a Lille. Okay, we're selling this player for 10,000 euros. If this player gets sold, we'll get 10% of that sale, of that sale. So the player gets sold for 30 million euros, and then that club gets 3 million euros. So the question of a sell-on clause is nothing new. It's not particular to Victor Osimhen. And I did some calculations. So going by Sunday Oliseh's metric, Isak will be what, his whole transaction will be what, let's say 202 million pounds to acquire him. So is that stopping anyone? Though I feel using this sort of metric is unfair, but I decided to use it as well to just show how silly it is. Now, the final point I want to make on this before I end this video: Victor Osimhen not going to a top club is not something that affects him so much, because he's going to play well, score goals in Turkey like he always does. He will get paid like he deserves to be paid. And if he keeps impressing, who knows? Real Madrid could come knocking. Barcelona could come knocking. Maybe Chelsea even could come knocking and pay him even bigger bucks and get an even huger payday for Galatasaray. But his move, how you value your best, affects the valuation of the lowest. So this would affect, that 15-year-old boy, that 16-year-old kid, 17-year-old kid playing Nigerian grassroots football, how he's valued. So before we go on to sometimes accuse players or attack players, let's take note. And one thing I want to say finally is this. Ademola, look, we talk about character issues for Victor James Osimhen, and there's none, like I've said, he's not perfect, but there's none that would, go so far as affecting him. Look, Ademola Lookman has some issues as well in terms of his move from Atalanta wanting to go to Inter Milan. And we know Ademola Lookman has zero character issues and is a super quiet player, super quiet person in terms of when you look at footballers and celebrities, but he's still having issues with his club. So are you going to put that down to character issues as well? Come on. Let's point that comes to the end of this video. Do have a splendid rest of your day. Stay well, stay blessed.